I have always been a very big fan of the Nintendo 64. Sure, it's a stupid little console with an awkward controller, a comparatively small library, a largely underwhelming output from every third-party developer other than Rare, and a cartridge slot in 1996, but it's my stupid little console. I may have been born a decade too late to grow up playing it, but I did grow up playing the Nintendo DS remake of Mario 64. I logged dozens of hours on my cousin's old N64 on the Rare trip to Grandma's house, and the 3DS remakes of Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Star Fox 64 practically defined the gaming aspects of my middle school era. I might not be old enough to feel nostalgia for the N64, but I've always loved it. That being said, ever since getting my own N64 a little under 2 years ago, I haven't even come close to spending as much time with it as I thought I would. Not from a lack of trying, of course, because I love the damn thing, but there's just so many other games and consoles that I love too. But it is still kinda sad watching my N64 collection collect dust. So I made a decision. For the entire month of July, I would only play N64 games. It actually went pretty well for one entire day until my friends wanted me to play Guilty Gear with them, so I changed the rules a little bit. For the entire month of July, I would play at least 1 hour of N64 a day. I would exclusively play N64 games unless I was playing games in person with other people, and to keep me honest and also to give this challenge a purpose, I'd make the damn video. So how did it go? Well, that's what the video's for, dumbass. The first game I played this month was Mario 64, because it just wouldn't have felt right starting out with anything else. This was the console's main launch title. It was what most people's first game was back when the console was first coming out, and it's the game that the console's controller was designed for. There really isn't any other option. I mean, there is, but I'm not buying a copy of Pilot Wings. You can buy it for me if you want. Anyway, this isn't the first time I've played Mario 64. I played the DS version a little bit here and there as a kid, and I put a few hours into the 3D All-Stars re-release on Switch, but playing it on the original N64 just hits different. Despite its age, Mario 64 holds up really well. It controls beautifully, the movement is on par with even the most recent 3D Mario games, and I never feel like I am not in full control of Mario. I'll admit that the camera controls can be a little awkward sometimes, but the camera is so rarely anywhere other than exactly where I want it to be that it hardly even matters. And then there's the individual levels. These things are insane. Even with a few annoyingly reused themes and assets and 3 entire water levels, all intentionally designed to be a cruel joke on me specifically, I was repeatedly astonished by how every level managed to feel unbelievably unique, incredibly engaging, overwhelmingly creative, and most importantly, fun. These levels will see you climbing mountains, racing Koopas, sliding across ice, swimming under the ocean, and flying through the clouds. This was Nintendo's first attempt at a 3D platformer, and they immediately hit it out of the park. Immediately after beating Mario 64, I went out with some friends and we ended up connecting the N64 to my girlfriend's car TV. Piled into the trunk of her dumbass Chevy, my friends and I played 3 of the console's best games on a monitor so small that it actually made the N64 look HD. Interestingly enough, I would continue to play all 3 games sporadically throughout the entire rest of the month. We started out with Mario Kart 64, and I gotta say, going back to 64 after spending the first few years with 8 Deluxe is certainly an adjustment. This game is old as balls and is the first 3D game in the series, and you can definitely tell. The list of characters and courses is tiny, with the majority of the game's tracks either being bland and lifeless or poorly designed, with awkward lengths, overly disruptive obstacles, and unreasonably sharp turns. The driving feels clunky and archaic, the drifting never seems to work the way I want it to, and the karts always seem to be moving just a little too fast or too slow for whatever course they're currently on. It is easily my least favorite game in the series, but I still don't think it's the worst. And even if it was, the worst Mario Kart game is still way more fun than 90% of the games out there. And despite its flaws, there is a certain charm to Mario 64 far beyond simple novelty. And once you get into it, it actually ends up being a lot of fun. The character roster might be small compared to later entries, but this results in a cast exclusively comprised of A-listers and results in the roster actually being a lot stronger than some of the later entries, especially 7 and Vanilla 8. I mean, seriously. 5 babies? Those little fuckers aren't even old enough to drive! I might not like a lot of this game's tracks, but the tracks I do like are easily some of the best in the series. Toad's Turnpike, Bowser's Castle, Royal Raceway, Wario Stadium, Rainbow Road? They made Mario gay! The item balancing is absolutely incredible. There are straight up no bad pulls. No matter what I am getting, I am never unhappy, and on the other side, no matter what item I get hit with, I never feel like I am being cheated. The carts may control awkwardly, but that ends up making the game feel way more difficult and skill-based. And while difficulty and skill aren't necessarily things I associate with the average session of Mario Kart, it does lead to Mario Kart 64 feeling incredibly unique and allows it to be one of the few games in the series that is actually worth going back to instead of just playing 8 Deluxe. I might not be this game's biggest fan, but I acknowledge its quality, and I am never not having fun while playing it. We then jump to Mario Party 2, which is the only N64 Mario Party I own. I don't have 1 or 3, but I do have 2. Don't ask me why, it just kinda happened. And much like every Mario Party prior to 9 and also Superstars, this is a very solid entry. The boards are all creative and complex with a heavy emphasis on showing off the unique characteristics designed to match their individual themes. The expansive roster of minigames is almost exclusively comprised of bangers, even if a lot of the games are too long, slightly overcomplicated, or overly dependent on luck and button mashing. The overall visual design is very clear and full of personality, and the game's fans would probably hunt me for sport if I didn't at least mention the little costumes the characters get on every stage. And they are very cute. The game is far more unforgiving than more recent entries, with CPUs that actively throw in team-based minigames, an unreasonable amount of Koopa, Bowser, and happening spaces, and tons of opportunities to lose all your coins, get sent back to the start, or both. And as a result, every game can be decided by anything from a single good or bad turn to a 50-turn bad luck streak, and it is incredible. There are few games quite as intense as this stupid little party game for children, and I find myself shouting bullshit way more often while playing Mario Party 2 than I do while playing any other game. And that is perhaps the best compliment you can ever give a game like Mario Party. This is bullshit! And finally, we played This one is easily the game I spent the most time playing this month. It is the first game in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise, and until I started working on this video, I thought that meant it would be one of the worst. I would like to offer a formal apology. This game is so much fun! Going back to 64 after playing Ultimate can be a little difficult because a significant lack of the franchise's core movement and attack options can make the game feel slow and clunky. And the N64 controller not meshing well with Smash's gameplay certainly doesn't help. But once you finally start to get the hang of things and get accustomed to Smash 64's uniqueness, you start flying. This is one of the fastest games in the entire franchise with some insane combo potential. It doesn't exactly reach the heights of Melee or even Ultimate, but that's actually pretty good for a game that's missing air dodges, down throws, and side Bs. In theory, these missing options should make the game feel incredibly limited, but it's so fast-paced and the options you do have are so powerful that the missing features are barely noticeable. Furthermore, the character roster is very strong and well-rounded. Basically, every character you expect to be here makes an appearance alongside a few random assholes, and damn near every video game genre is represented. Platformers, adventure games, RPGs, both traditional and wacky, racing games, Metroid, it's all here. And the characters all fall into traditional fighting game archetypes incredibly well. The Shoto's Shoto, the Rushdown's Rushdown, the Zoner's Zone. I do wish the grapplers were a little better at grappling, and as much as I hate to admit it, the game could really use another another sword fighter, and maybe another heavy, but other than that, the roster is very solid. The stage list is likewise damn near perfect, with each stage being unique, wacky, and memorable, as well as incredible representations of their home series. I do wish we could have gotten stages for F-Zero and Earthbound, but at the same time, it's kinda weird that this many of Nintendo's worst selling franchises made an appearance at all, so we'll kind of just take what we can get. I also kind of wish that there were one or two more competitively viable stages, but I also acknowledge that literally no one was thinking about competitive viability when they made this game. Beyond characters and stages, 64 also manages to have some of the best single-player modes in the entire franchise, despite also having the least, with this game's classic mode being the obvious highlight. Also, the items in this game are really bad. They range anywhere from being completely useless to insanely overpowered. I mean, every once in a while you will find an item with some semblance of balancing, but the vast majority find themselves at one of two extremes. But that doesn't stop them from being a lot of fun. All in all, the original Super Smash Bros. Is an incredible game, arguably the best fighting game on the console, and easily one of the best N64 games overall. But its hardware limitations and short development cycle hold the game back, and as a result, it's not exactly surprising that this game's reputation and cultural impact is limited to little more than it being known as the first one, which is a shame because I really like this game, and if it had spent another year or two in the oven, it probably would have been a near perfect game. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was one of the games I was most excited to play this month, and the second I found the time, I immediately poured my life into it. It is important to mention that I did beat the 3DS remake back in middle school, but it's been so long and my ability to think critically about media in general has improved so much that this was practically a brand new experience. This game is often cited as being the greatest game of all time, particularly by Metacritic, where it holds the single highest video game critic score on the entire website. And while I don't really consider Ocarina of Time to be my favorite game of all time, or even my favorite N64 Zelda game, I completely understand the sentiment. Ocarina of Time is a genuinely incredible game that took a franchise traditionally restricted to 2 dimensions and flawlessly made the jump to 3D with gorgeous animation, complex and engaging gameplay, a surprisingly large number of creative dungeons with challenging puzzles, a famously beautiful soundtrack, and a story so good that even 25 years after the game's initial release, it is still one of the greatest arguments for video games as an art form. At the time of its release, Ocarina of Time was a genuinely unique and groundbreaking game that permanently altered the course of the video game industry, and decades later, it is still managing to impact and influence every corner of said industry. It did so much more than simply define a genre. It helped define modern gaming as a whole. It might not be my favorite, but The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is undeniably one of the greatest games of all time. The Fire and Water Temples still suck though, so, 0 out of 10? After playing Ocarina of Time, I was kind of in a puzzle game mood. Luckily, my N64 collection includes 2 of the greatest puzzle games ever made, and also Tetrisphere, a game that definitely exists. Puzzle League is one of my all-time favorite franchises, he says, only ever having played 2 of the games, and Pokemon Puzzle League is a wonderful addition to the series. Of course, this is in no way due to the brand new Pokemon theming, which as far as I can tell doesn't affect the gameplay at all, and operates as little more than an incredibly underwhelming reskin, only ever adding some still images, the occasional cutscene, and some painfully annoying sound bites.
Way to go! Way to go!
Way to go! What actually makes this game so good is the Puzzle League aspect. The core gameplay from Tetris Attack makes a complete return with few to no obvious changes, which is great because Tetris Attack was undeniably one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. The gameplay is just as unique and creative as it was the first time around, and it maintains the first game's heavy emphasis on careful long-term planning and strategic decision-making. And alongside the core gameplay, Pokemon Puzzle League has a veritable treasure trove of side modes. So many side modes, in fact, that I didn't even get the chance to meaningfully interact with every aspect of the game. The returning puzzle mode and brand new 3D mode are easily the highlights of the side content. The puzzle mode has a downright insane amount of levels, all of which are incredibly creative and can range anywhere from piss baby easy to how do I beat this? Never mind, I figured it out.
Almost there.
And the 3D mode is way more fun than it had any right to be, and manages to be a creative and well-implemented use of the N64's three-dimensional capabilities. The developers absolutely did not need to include it since no one would have noticed if it wasn't there, so I don't know what's more impressive. The fact that they made this, or the fact that they managed to make it mesh so well with the classic gameplay. Pokémon Puzzle League is an incredible game that manages to steal hours of my life every time I play it. Dr. Mario 64 was my grandmother's favorite N64 game, and for good reason. The original Dr. Mario on NES was already a phenomenal puzzle game, one of the best not only on NES, but also just in general. And Dr. Mario 64 is basically just that game with better graphics, more personality, a bunch of side content, and a 4-player versus mode. The gameplay is, of course, very solid. It's hard not to be when it's literally just Dr. Mario. The side modes are largely indistinguishable from the core gameplay, but they do a very good job of rounding out the overall game and firmly establishing it as a sequel. It is missing a dedicated puzzle mode, which had long since become a staple of the genre, but it's also kind of hard to complain about that when the core gameplay is basically a puzzle mode in itself. Instead, there is a sort of single-player campaign, which is admittedly pretty fun, but it's also a little too short to justify its own existence, especially when it's just classic mode with cutscenes. But I'm so glad it's here. I'm also a very big fan of the decision to add a bunch of unique CPUs who all have different playstyles and difficulty levels. It vastly expands both the replayability and the customization of the game, and should honestly be a staple of the puzzle game genre as a whole. I was also surprised by just how difficult and strategically complex this game can be, despite its seemingly simple gameplay. It really does take an unexpected amount of game knowledge and strategy to beat this game at higher difficulties, but more than anything, the thing that most impresses me about this game is its overall aesthetic. Every aspect of Dr. Mario 64's visual and auditory design is just so fun and energetic and playful, with the development team's undeniable enthusiasm so overpowering that it's practically leaking out of the dirty doctor's ears. The third and final puzzle game I own on the N64 is Tetrisphere, and don't let the name fool you, it is absolutely not Tetris, no matter how badly I wish it was. I honestly don't know what this game is. The goal of the game is unclear, and the gameplay is a bit confusing, so I never really know what I'm supposed to be doing or if I'm doing it properly. This game is very clearly an attempt to adapt the concept of Tetris to the third dimension, but it does this by stripping away everything that could have made the game recognizable as a Tetris. I mean, the silly little blocks are all still here, but that's about where the similarities start and end. Other than the blocks and its name, Tetrisphere is entirely its own thing. Poor Tetrisphere. The core gameplay is relatively unique, the obligatory puzzle mode is very creative, I absolutely adore the game's early 90s sci-fi aesthetic, and the game is surprisingly fun even though I have no idea what I'm doing, but at the end of the day, I kinda wish I had just bought one of the N64's normal Tetris games. I spent a lot of time playing Pokémon Puzzle League and Dr. Mario 64 this month. Tetrisphere, not so much. It was around this time that I found myself in the mood to play an RPG. Unfortunately, when it comes to RPGs on the N64, options are extremely limited. There are really only 3 RPGs on the console, and Paper Mario is pretty expensive, so things weren't exactly looking good. Fortunately, I had recently picked up a copy of Quest 64, a game famous for being an N64 RPG and not much else. I popped it on stream, genuinely excited to play it, only to find out that it is one one of only 2 N64 games that require an N64 controller pack accessory to save game data. An accessory that I do not have because why would I? Once again, the creators of the U-Draw have shown us exactly why they had the reputation they did before they went out of business. So instead of Quest 64, I ended up playing a little bit of Pokémon Stadium. As a simple battle simulator, Pokémon Stadium doesn't quite scratch the same itch as a traditional RPG, but it was still a lot of fun. The game lets you take the vast majority of the first generation's 151 Pokémon and use them in a series of 3-on-3 battles. The levels, stats, and movesets are all predetermined, which does simplify things and let you get straight into battling, but if you want more control over the teams you run, the game does let you import Pokemon from the Game Boy games into the game through the N64 transfer pack. The battling is a lot of fun, possibly even more so than in mainline games, but a lot of Pokemon's charm is lost in a game without any exploration or catching mechanics. That being said, the game more than makes up for it with its downright incredible animations. Every Pokemon and every move has completely unique animations simply overflowing with creativity and personality. It is genuinely incredible. I have more fun watching these animations than I do actually battling. That is how good they are. When people complain about the bland and uninspired animation in modern 3D Pokemon games, shit like this is exactly why they are disappointed. I mean, just look at this. Beyond the animations, the core gameplay is literally just Pokemon battling, which is pretty solid, therefore the game as a whole is solid. I mean, the AI trainers are kind of pathetic, especially at lower cups, but even then, the game is still pretty fun. Pokémon Stadium also has the obligatory 4-player minigames that come packed into damn near every N64 game, and I don't know what's more impressive, how many games there are, or how much fun they manage to be. Snore War, Magikarp Splash, Thundering Dynamo, Sushi Go Round, that one's my favorite. There really are no bad games in this set, even if half of them are glorified single-button rhythm games. After my puzzle game and RPG phase, I felt the urge to spend some time with a personal favorite, F-Zero X. Prior to playing F-Zero X for the very first time earlier this year, my only interaction with the series was through my copy of the original F-Zero on Super Nintendo. And as a result, I never really understood why people were so adamant that this series make a return. Don't get me wrong, F-Zero is a great game, one of the best on its console, but I always found it to be just a little too simple and repetitive to be anything special or have this loyal of a cult following, especially when compared to all of the other racing games in existence. That was until I played F-Zero X and everything fell into place. This weird little fucker is one of the greatest games I have ever played. It is a racing game with an extreme emphasis on the idea of going as fast as possible with absolutely no limits. It is a game so fast-paced that even Sonic the Hedgehog himself is like, whoa, slow down a little. That was just so stupid. Why did I say that? The game's racetracks are all incredibly long in order to compensate for its fast pace, and yet you can still rocket through entire cups in mere minutes, making it the perfect game to just pick up and play when I need a short break from schoolwork or editing. The tracks are all diverse and creatively designed, even if the backdrops are a little oversimplified. The absolutely massive roster of unlockable characters is a really cool idea, even though I didn't get the opportunity to interact with it in any meaningful capacity. And the soundtrack is one of the best I've ever heard. Everything in this game, from the track design to the rapidly shifting backdrops to the subtle but expressive animations, all the way up to the game's incredible soundtrack, all work in perfect tandem to create the feeling of downright insane speeds. This game is fast as fuck, fun as hell, and tough as nails. It is without a doubt, full stop, my absolute favorite racing game of all time. No question. And from what I've heard, the next game in the series, F-Zero GX, is even better. How do they keep doing this? The last game I played this month was Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, a game that is not only my all-time favorite Zelda game, but also my favorite N64 game overall. As a result, I just had to squeeze this game in at the end. I was quite literally playing it while writing and editing this video, which made things way more stressful than they had to be. But it was totally worth it. Everything about this game is just incredible. As a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, nearly everything that made the previous game great makes an appearance in Majora's Mask, including the majority of Ocarina of Time's models and assets. The incredible character writing carries over from the first game, although it does get way less time to shine, but when it does show up, oh boy, it really shows up. The animations are incredibly strong and very fun to watch, possibly even better than Ocarina of Time. The dungeons are easily some of the best in the franchise, which makes it kind of painful that there are only 4. Of course, this does allow them to be far more unique and memorable, but that also makes the bad one a lot harder to justify. The game's story is by far my favorite in the entire franchise. It has this all-encompassing, overwhelming sense of dread and darkness with impressive horror elements and complex themes about life and death. I can totally see why Majora's Mask has built this reputation as the darkest Zelda game, but it also has this overwhelming sense of hope and optimism that washes away all that darkness. And the game's central gimmicks of masks and 3-day time limits are very memorable and engaging, even if one of them is a little terrifying and the other one stressed me out so much as a child that I had to turn the N64 off. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is without a doubt my favorite N64 game of all time, and I am very excited to actually fucking finish it once this video goes up. And that is all of the games I played this month. Now, I didn't mention it earlier, but I did have a few goals that I set for this challenge. I wanted to gain a better understanding of the N64 and its library. I wanted to finally put enough time into playing the N64 to justify my purchase. I wanted to recapture some of the magic that I experienced playing N64 as a child. And I wanted to play every single game in my N64 collection. And I definitely succeeded at 3 of those goals. I definitely appreciate and understand the N64 and its library far more than I did before this challenge. My purchase definitely feels justified now, and even if childhood magic is incredibly difficult to recapture, I still had a lot of fun with this challenge and the games I played over the course of the past month. As for my goal of playing through my entire library, well, here's the stack of games I actually played, and here's what's left over. Not too bad, all things considered. But I do feel a little guilty for skipping over some must-play titles like Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye, and it would have been nice to finally make some progress towards beating Kirby 64. But I guess there's always next time? Either way, I do see a lot more N64 in my future. I love this dumb little console more than ever, and even now, I still don't want to stop playing it. I am very excited to finally get to play something else, though. It has been a very long month. But all in all, this was a really fun and incredibly successful challenge, and I kind of want to do it again. Maybe with the NES or Xbox Game Pass or Nintendo Switch Online? I don't know. I don't really plan on doing anything like this again anytime soon. But I do still kind of want to do another one of these challenges eventually. But it's not like there's any rush. I have my entire life to keep on doing silly little challenges and making stupid little videos. And for the record, I don't really plan on dying for at least another 2,000 to 3,000 years. Wait, what the fuck? Do you guys hear that? What is that? Shit.